this is the Mito podcast, and I am Ashley.
And I'm Megan.
And we have two very special guests with us today. Would you guys like to introduce yourselves?
Yeah, hi, I'm Bree Billingsley.
And I'm Jesse.
And we're the parents of Kyra.
Now, we met over Instagram, and what's interesting is I met the both of you on the same day, but separately. And it was, I didn't look before, I was going to look before we started the podcast, but I think it was even within the same hour. You guys had both messaged me. And it was just really cool to hear from both of you at the same time. And at the time, we had met over Instagram just because of our kids. I'm sure it was probably maybe a hashtag or something that brought us together, which is just interesting because that's kind of how I've met most people with Mito, is actually more through Instagram than through Facebook, which is really neat.
Yeah, same with me.
So why don't you guys go ahead and talk a little bit about Kyra and how your Mito story sort of began. How did your diagnosis start?
Okay. So Kyra was born, I had a beautiful pregnancy with her. She's 3.5. So we had a great pregnancy and a pretty good delivery. I had an emergency C-section, but pretty typical. And she was only in the NICU for about like 45 minutes. Yeah. And she was really a typical baby. And she passed all of her newborn screening tests, and we were nursing. I mean, it was hard, but we were nursing, and we had a really wonderful 8 months with Kyra before we figured out there was something wrong.
She started having some just tone issues, where I think her first diagnosis was that she was hypotonic. And so she just wasn't meeting her milestones at around 8 or 9 months, and just was having some trouble like with tummy time and keeping her head up, and never rolled over really. Maybe she did one time, but with some assistance.
When she was like 4 months old, she was like rolling over for a minute, and I was like, this is so great, you're a genius. And then I think that there was regression. But it's so hard as new parents to know what's typical or not. And I think you'll hear me use that word typical a lot. I don't like normal, it feels weird. But yeah, I think there was some regression. And then we started seeing physical therapy, and we're like, yeah, she's scored so low on her original assessment, like negative points. It was really shocking for us. That's when we kind of knew, like, oh, this is so much worse than we thought it was. And then neurology visit, and he's like, everything's fine, just keep her in physical therapy. I don't want to do labs or an MRI,
anything like that.
And I was like, oh, okay, but something's wrong, but we'll keep, we went hardcore on the PT, but it just kept getting worse and worse. And she was super fussy, and then started having seizures, and that's when we went to the hospital and got diagnosed.
So,
and it was infantile spasms.
So how many?
Started with like eye movements. The very first time we noticed it, I was actually playing with her, and was holding around, like kind of doing like the airplane kind of style thing, and her eyes would start rolling into the back of her head, like kind of flicking towards the side. And I was like, told Brie, I was like, that almost looked like a seizure, but I was like, didn't think she would obviously have seizures.
Yeah.
And so it started with that, and then just became more and more repetitious, to the point where we actually were on our way to the hospital, and she just started having multiple seizures over and over again. And then when we actually got her to the ER, they said that she was in status epilepticus, so she was just having constant seizures. And so we had to go through all of the diagnosing and getting her stabilized, and that was a pretty rough night, obviously, just figuring out what we had ahead of us.
So when you guys got to the hospital, obviously they were telling you about epilepsy, but with diagnosis towards Mito, what tests did they give her there?
So when we were admitted, they did an MRI, a bunch of blood tests, but I think what made them realize this was like a metabolic or type. They first started with, we're calling it a metabolic thing, was from the low white matter in her MRI.
Okay. And have you guys had more tests done since then?
Yeah. So then multiple admissions. I think they started the process of whole exome testing, whole exome sequencing, right? And that took a while for us. It took like 6 months to get those results back.
Oh, wow. That's a really long time.
Yeah. They were like, all right, well, yeah, she has seizures. She can't eat anymore. She has a feeding tube.
Well, and I guess to back up a little bit, though, that within that first night of admission, it was either that night or the second, we were trying to bottle feed her because she wasn't latching or anything with breastfeeding. And she just started choking. And within that 12 hours, she was nothing by mouth. And we were starting to talk about
right away.
G-tube and all this stuff. So it was a very, very quick progression with that first admission.
So like the day before, I'm nursing my daughter just fine. You know, what I'm kind of annoyed about is that she had a lip tie and nobody told me. And I found out later. So we were having tubal nursing, but we were doing it. And she was 9 months old or something and it was going great. And then seizures, admission. I was nursing her in the hospital and the nurse or the occupational therapist came in and said, look at your shirt. She's like, she's not getting any milk. It's going down her face and it's going down you. And I looked down and I was like, oh my God. She can usually do this. And that's how we stopped nursing. And that was terrible. It was the worst way to stop. Not the worst way to stop nursing, obviously.
Yeah.
But that sucked. And then she got an NG and then she got a feeding tube.
That's just so much to happen all at one time.
Yeah. I was like, you guys don't know. Like, this isn't Kyra. What are you guys talking about? No, she's okay. But, you know, we did go to her pediatrician when she first started having some, like, fussiness and kind of were noticing eye movements, but I didn't know what a seizure looked like. He didn't know what an infantile spasm looked like. And the doctor was like, oh, she just has a cold. And I was like, oh, I think there's something else going on. He's like, no. He was like a super lax pediatrician. He's a really good pediatrician for typical kids. It just sucks that I took her in and she was having seizures for who knows how long, and the doctor didn't even see it.
Yeah. That's so scary. I'm sorry that all of that happened all at once.
Thank you.
I mean, that's like, you can't even say I'm sorry because it doesn't really do it justice, because I mean, I didn't have a fast decline like that, but I mean, we had a decline, but it was within a couple of days, and it was because we thought she was having seizures and she wasn't.
Oh, okay.
Medication for the seizures, and that medication is what really caused her. But it wasn't like that. Ours was all very gradual. So I mean, when we went into the hospital, I understand the part of you're nursing your healthy baby, and then all of a sudden that's kind of taken away from you.
I know you do know that, don't you?
Yeah, but I mean, obviously it wasn't to the extent as it was for you. I mean, she's in your arms and you think that you're feeding, and
I'm like, look, it's fine. And they're like, no, honey, you have to look. She's not getting any milk. And I was like, wow, it's just the decline that seizures can cause. But yeah, to back up, just talking about what she was diagnosed with. She has mitochondrial disorder, Lee's-like. So she doesn't actually have Lee's syndrome, because what they say is that she doesn't have lesions on her brain. She has low white matter, but she does just have a genetic mutation in the IARS2 gene, I guess. And nobody else has that besides. I found somebody in France, and I think in Japan. The language barrier is obviously hard, but I think there's 2 other kids that we found that have that exact same mutation.
I think I actually know who you're talking about, because I've talked to her a couple of the mom in Japan, right?
Oh yeah,
Yeah, I think I've talked to her a couple of times, a while ago, not since. And sorry about my dog. He sensed something was going on, but he doesn't jump in my lap very often. But
my son Troy, he doesn't have the same genetic diagnosis as you, but very similar in the beginning, the hypotonia, and neurologist completely saying, oh, it's okay, just give him some time, do some PT, and then just us knowing that this isn't right, and just having to go to other neurologists, and the same getting the Lee-like diagnosis, which he's 12 years old and we still have that, and we just got a completely non-Mito related diagnosis with more genetic testing done.
Oh wow.
So it's very, because he doesn't have lesions on his brain either.
Yeah.
So he does have some white matter issues, but it's very interesting. We see a lot in talking to different parents how the stories, just kind of those similar symptoms. And I mean, my pregnancy was fine. He was born and he didn't have any issues, just the hypotonia. And fortunately, he's never had a serious decline. But, it's just that whole pathway. It just seems that, a lot of parents just go through that. And most of us are new parents, and it's like, oh, you don't know what's wrong. I kept going to my friends, well, I don't know if this is normal. Look, he's not really holding his head up. Like, what do you think? Because you don't know. You've never had a child before. And It's like you're trying to figure this all out and trying not to be, over dramatic about, no, something's going on. And so it's definitely, it's hard. I mean, I think back and I'm like, do I remember his first year of life? It's just like there was so much going on and trying to figure out so much. I'm like, what even happened?
Yeah, I remember being so relieved when they told me that something was wrong with Kyra, because I'd been feeling that way and I had been comparing her milestones to other kids, and that just kept me up at night. Like, she wasn't hitting it, and I was so obsessed with those milestones. I'm like, when is she going to start doing this? When is she going to start doing this? But this girl and I had this baby at the same time, and her kids are doing way more. And so like that just sigh of relief to not have to keep up with those milestones anymore was really nice.
Yeah.
How weird is that?
Well, it takes that mystery out of it. It takes that investigation that you keep doing in your mind about what's happening. It's like, oh, something really is happening.
Yeah.
So when you guys got the final or the latest genetic testing or diagnosis, what type of test did they do, like blood or tissue?
Yeah, blood.
Well, so they did blood, but we've had quite a bit of issues with specimen collection. So we tried to do a skin biopsy, and it got lost in route to the testing center. So that took us 4 months to 5 months to delay that whole thing. And then we had it done again, and this was in a different state, so we had to drive about 500 miles round trip roughly, right? Something like that.
Yeah.
And so we got the second skin biopsy, and it came back normal.
So normal mitochondrial function in her skin biopsy. So but to start, we did the whole exome sequencing with the blood test, tested Kyra, and then tested us. And then it came back Lee's syndrome. That's what they told us. They were like, oh, we have the diagnosis. She has Lee's syndrome. And then we ended up getting kind of a second opinion in Seattle, because we're in Idaho, Boise, Idaho. So we drive to Seattle and go to Seattle Children's, which is an amazing hospital. And they have a Mito specialist there. So he did her whole workup, EEG, MRI, based off of the testing, the West testing. And he's like, she doesn't have Lee's syndrome. He's like, no, she doesn't. And then he left the room. He left. I was like mid EEG with Kyra, and there's like only one parent allowed in there. I'm just holding her, and he pops in. He's like, hey, she have Lee's syndrome. And then he closes the door and leaves. And I was just like,
any follow-up with that?
It's just like, okay, all right. No, he's so cute. He's so funny, this doctor. I love him. But so she just has Lee's-like syndrome because her MRI does not look like a Lee's syndrome kid as much because of the lesion. So so now we're still trying to get a muscle biopsy.
Yeah, well, and then so we did that second skin biopsy. It came back normal. So then it's like, well, let's try the muscle to see if we can confirm that, because our biggest objective, I guess, with that is if we can prove that it's a mitochondrial disorder, we have an opportunity to get on a drug trial. And without that, we don't even have that opportunity. And so we drove out again for another biopsy. And this time it was when there was a issue going on with their OR. And so we literally showed up for the pre-anesthesia appointment the day before, had no idea that they were shutting down, and they told us, and so they wanted us to go through the whole surgery appointments. So we went to 3 appointments and then turned around and drove.
So you need to go home because we're canceling your appointment.
So we still have not been able to get that done because we were supposed to go back in June and have a bunch of things done, but obviously with COVID, that's all on hold too.
That's crazy.
So Kyra just has Kyra's disease. No?
Yeah, well, and that's she could potentially have something so rare that it could be called Kyra's disease.
Yeah, and that's the thing that I think is so hard about mitochondrial disease. And I don't know, actually, if you listen to the symposium yesterday, the UMDF had the symposium for the last 2 days, but they were saying that it's like 50% of children with, say, a mitochondrial dysfunction or disease or myopathy do not have a specific diagnosis. And that's the same thing with my son. He did have a muscle biopsy. That was the first thing that they had. Came back with red ragged fibers. It came back with complex 4 and 5, but he's never had any genetic markers that say that he has a mitochondrial disease. So it's more of a almost like a secondary diagnosis, which we didn't know until we got this recent diagnosis of Soto's syndrome. But it's very interesting that unfortunately there are some diseases that are so rare, some mitochondrial diseases that are rare that they just haven't even discovered yet. I know that with our journey, you get on Facebook and you try to find, this new disease and try to find parents. And just in the last week, I've found multiple parents that have had this diagnosis that my son now has, but yet they have mitochondrial dysfunction as well.
Oh,
and
wow.
Our geneticist said that, 10 years ago when Troy actually had some genetic testing done, they didn't even know about this, his current disease. They wouldn't have found it. So it's so crazy. And they were talking about that actually at the symposium yesterday, that literally genetics has come so far now that you can get tested in another 3 or 4 years and, might actually get your diagnosis. But we were worried, like I heard you say about, getting him into trials. And unless you have a genetic diagnosis, they won't do into the trials. And I was like, we have to do this. Like, he can't just be an unknown, mitochondrial disease, who knows?
Yeah.
So, yeah, it
the only thing a diagnosis is going to do for Kyra is hopefully get her into this drug trial. But even if you have kids with the same diagnosis, everyone is so different with Mito and probably other diseases that are similar that present like Mito diseases. But everyone is so different. So you can't look at Angie and look at Kyra and compare because they're just presented so differently.
And I think that's what's hard for doctors too, is just that they can have the exact same genetic diagnosis down to the same deletion and they can present completely different and take a completely different pathway. Some pass away early and some are still, doing fine. So yeah, it's a very interesting disease.
Yeah. I don't get so hung up on the finding the exact name or disease or anything anymore because I'm just like, Kyra's going to do what Kyra's going to do. Exactly. This is all what Kyra wants. So, we're just going to follow her lead and do the best we can. But I would love to have more research and information.
Absolutely.
But what do you do? If you think when the child's going to pass away, do you want to know or do you just want to live life? Do you want to put a timeline on that? Like I don't.
Yeah. And I think too, you think, well, what if there's a different treatment? But the problem with most of these diseases out there is there aren't treatments. Like even Troy has a different diagnosis now, and it's the exact same treatment that he was already on. So it's not, you hope that there's going to be something out there, which, maybe there might be.
I know, it would be exciting almost. Yeah,
exactly. So when you have that diagnosis, maybe you have, other pathways to look at. But rare diseases tend to, not have different treatments. So it's just, just enjoying your child and, enjoying what they can do, not comparing them to others. Like you said, you guys are way ahead of the ball game with that. So, yeah.
Yeah. Andrew and I always said that we would make sure that Angie always had the best of her life. We never wanted to just add years, just to add the years. We wanted every day to be meaningful and to be packed full of fun and love and just doing things that we thought that she would enjoy or us as a family would want to have memories of. But I can say, and it like you were saying, like how every kid is different and there's all these different trials and drugs. And one thing that is really hard to step forward that you kind of have to stop yourself with is things are going to happen. And like you're saying, like Kyra is Kyra. She's kind of, I mean, she's got the steering wheel, right? With what the type of diagnosis that she's going to have. And it's the same with all of these different drugs. You can't live your life thinking, oh, but if my child had that one drug or if that one vitamin, or if I had known about this 5 years ago, you can't allow that to steer your life.
I can understand, because that would be, it's just going to eat at you, I mean, there's always going to be progression and things like that in science and stuff like that, but you can only do what you can do right now for her.
Exactly.
Yeah. And these things are so rare. Yeah, exactly. And these things are so rare. You don't know if that one thing could have helped. And you can live in the hope that maybe it would have, but it could be the opposite. It might have not helped at all. So
yeah.
But definitely having the happiest days that you possibly can.
We're all about that, aren't we?
Yes.
Maybe too much fun.
Yeah.
I don't think it's too much.
We took Kyra out on the boat yesterday, and she was feeling better, and she had fun. She got to go on a boat ride.
That's really cool. So what is like day-to-day life now with Kyra?
Well, it's different every day.
Routines are so hard, and that's what we struggle with, is because
I think the
so
biggest
hard.
thing I can compare it to is a roller coaster. I mean, we'll have a good day, and then we'll have a really bad day, and then we'll have a couple good days, and she'll be kind of just, absent a little bit, just, because her energy level is just constantly changing, as you guys are aware. And so it seems like she'll just be able to finally store up just a little bit enough energy where she's there, where she can track us. She's can recognize us because she'll smile or she'll smirk. And so, like for her, if we do have smiles and that type of energy, it's very short-lived. It's usually only for about 15-20 minutes, and we maybe experience it maybe, I don't know, once a week, or just kind of depends again of how she's doing. But she's busy, so lots of medications that she takes throughout the day. She does have a neurogenic bladder and bowel, and so she has to be cathed intermittently every 3 hours. We even have to infuse an antibiotic or push an antibiotic into her bladder each night to just help with her UTI issues. And then she has to have enema and stool softeners and all that kind of stuff to help her go poop. And she's
so by the time she's on continuous feed, so by the time you're done doing all the pooping and the peeing and the this and that, I'm exhausted.
Did you ever think you'd be a registered nurse?
Well, the thing is, Jesse luckily is a registered nurse.
Oh, that's awesome.
But I am too now.
Well, and this is the funny thing. So I was a bedside nurse for a few years, and I did like critical care ER, but I did the adult population. I never took care of kids because they always scared me, and their parents scared me. I'd never want to do a pediatric family. So I only did bedside for a few years, and then I moved more into doing the quality and administration side. And so I have definitely lost a lot of my training and just a lot of the stuff that I had learned. And so I kind of feel like I'm the nurse, but now Bree's the doctor, because she literally has just been a sponge. She's just learned so much, and she's really taught me a lot too, just with all the stuff that she's found, and her ability to just speak to it, like just retain that information without having that education. It's pretty impressive. So she's rocking it.
You guys,
I speak Kyra. I think. But yeah, so day to day is just a lot of maintenance stuff. We try to do therapy. Well, she's not really doing therapies right now. One, because of COVID, and two, because I'm struggling a little bit because she's not making improvements in therapies. And so it's been hard for our therapists to write for insurance to cover these therapies, justify it when they have these goals, but we don't usually meet them, or we can't find which goals to talk about. So we're kind of in a weird space with our physical therapies and speech therapies and stuff like that. I love doing them. It's kind of like something I look forward to. It's something that gets me out of bed on the hard days with Kyra. There's like purpose. There's like, okay, we're going to work on this. She loves her therapist. It kind of gives me routine and schedule because she doesn't sleep well. So, and she cries a lot. Kyra I know a lot of kids with her similar diagnosis don't cry, but Kyra is very vocal, and it's exhausting.
Her cousins nickname her Crya.
It's sad. We laugh because we just have to, but we're just tired a lot of the time. Jesse's working full time. He's also getting his MBA right now. He's almost done. So he's been doing this he started it right when Kyra was born, then he had to take some time off when she got diagnosed. But yeah, he's almost graduated, and we're just sleep deprived, like having a newborn.
Yeah, pretty much.
Well, congratulations on almost graduating. That's awesome.
That's amazing.
I had a question, but I forgot what it was. You guys were just talking about Kyra. Shoot.
It is interesting that you said that she cries a lot, because I think, Troy never really cried very much. He has a huge really high pain tolerance. So,
oh wow.
But a lot of the parents that we've spoken to have said that their children don't really cry very much.
When she was on phenobarbital, when they were first, that it's kind of a blanket drug for seizures when they can't figure out how to stop them. Then she stopped crying, and she was just a zombie, and that was so sad. She's on so many medications now, but we've figured out we're on a pretty good mix, and we are on the Mito cocktail like you guys were talking about in that episode. We do levocarnitine and B50 complex, and what else makes up
the CoQ10?
CoQ10. And she's keto, so she has to be keto. Like she's on a ketogenic diet, no sugars, nothing, because that's just how it kind of stops her seizures, or it lowers her seizures. And then if we introduce sugar at all, she starts seizing again.
Wow. Yeah, I read a lot about that. Troy has seizures as well. About that different diet. So that's amazing. That's really helpful.
Yeah,
it's really helped. It's just it's made it challenging with her medications, because any type of pill, especially for pediatrics, it's got carbs and sugars all over it. So
sunscreens have carbs and sugars in them.
It's pretty wild. Just trying to make sure we're not giving her any carbs at all. Because we can definitely see a pretty significant change even just with a little introduction.
Even topical things?
Absorbs into the skin. Oh, that's interesting.
Other med that she just started from her Mito doctor in Seattle is called N-acetylcysteine. And I've noticed it helps her energy levels so much. And that's also, it's also called Mucomist. A lot of kids with CF use that. So it helps. But it's actually an antioxidant.
Yeah, and is it NAC? Is that?
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that's helped.
Is it creatine?
No. It's Troy doesn't take it, but I've heard that a lot of people have been prescribed it lately. I think, I'm not 100% sure. It is an acetylcarnitine. So I'm not sure exactly what it is.
I should have asked my question better. The one that Christina, her kids started?
So they're on creatine.
Yeah, okay. Are you guys on creatine?
No, but I heard you talk about that in the episode, and so I was like, I really want to look into it. So I'll chat with our doctor and see what he thinks, because I'm like, I love supplements. I'm like, more merrier. You don't usually have a ton of side effects. And acetylcysteine did cause some side effects, so we had to figure that out, and Kyra was hospitalized. But that thing that kind of happens sometimes. But I'm all about trying new, supplements and things just to help her feel better. And
So when you guys go to the hospital, you go to the hospital obviously where you live, but your Mito doctor is in Washington. So how does that work? When you guys go into the hospital, do you have him on like speed dial and say, hey, you need to talk to this doctor before you do anything?
Yeah, it's not easy. I wish it was easier.
Yeah.
Our last admission, Kyra was admitted to the ICU at the end of March, so right in the middle of all of this COVID stuff. And I think it was because she was in respiratory failure, and I think it was because the N-acetylcysteine caused too much thickness, and so we weren't supplementing that with extra water, and she went into respiratory distress. And this is just my theory. They couldn't find anything on the respiratory panels that they did. But she had to be intubated, and she was intubated for
5-6 days.
Yeah, we were there for 12 days. I mean, we almost lost her. It was the scariest thing ever. So then we called the doctor. They're about to put the vent in. And I'm like, hold on. There's an anesthesia med that she cannot have. And I can't remember what it is because I'm in shock right now. I was like, you have to call the doctor right now. He's like, no, our anesthesiologists are really good. And I was like, no, call Seattle. This is what we're supposed to do. And luckily they did, because she can't have, what is the one they can't? Propofol. Yeah.
You know, one of the things that I think we talked about this on one of the podcasts, but it's something, like I said, my son's 12 years old, and this is such a learning journey. No matter how long you've had a Mito child, it's, you learn new things every day. But all of our doctors have written emergency letters that literally go through and say what they can have, what they can't have, what their diagnosis is. Because, I mean, I have that in my, in all of our cars and my purse, because when you get in those situations, you're like, I have no idea.
Yeah, I can't.
I'm stressed out, and exactly. And it's, so those are always good things to have, which honestly, I didn't even know about until I think actually we were talking amongst our Mito mom friends. I was like, what, you guys have an emergency letter? I didn't think about that. I just go in there with my knowledge that I hope is useful. And so it's always nice to have something like that to just hand to them hands so that they know.
Yes, totally. I agree.
And we even thought we were, prepared, just having her DNR status as like modified, and we thought we had a good plan in place. But part of that was we didn't want to intubate because we just never thought that she'd ever be able to come out of it, and we just thought we'd be, And
that's kind of what our palliative care team steered us towards. Like, if you put her on a vent, you might have to have the choice: are you going to take her off? Like, basically, you're going to take her off life support. And so that was in my brain. So when they're like, we need to intubate, I was like, this is the end.
Yeah.
And it wasn't. And she was extubated, and then she was smiling and happy.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's
it's
really back to her baseline.
It's the biggest thing I think that I've learned being a parent of Kyra, or medically fragile kid, is never say never. So like on our post, we're like, we're not intubating, but that was the right choice. And I've always said we're never doing it, but I think we've just learned, like, never say never.
Yeah, just address each situation differently.
Yeah, definitely.
Do you guys have are you involved with like a regional center where you guys are at? Does Idaho have that?
Yeah, so it's the hospital that we have, it's primarily just in our state. It's a level, I think it's a tertiary center. But yeah, they have they're the main pediatric center for the state of Idaho. And so they have a pretty good, just services available, but they still have a lot of opportunity as well. And so the majority of our care has been primarily in Idaho. We haven't had to transfer to Seattle to be admitted, but we have had some admissions in Seattle as well, where she was actually in the PICU there as well for 14 days.
Separate from the hospitals and separate from pediatrics, in California, we have our regional center goes through our school district. So I don't know if Idaho has one, but you might want to look into it, because if they do, then it gives Kyra some extra resources for therapies and for a teacher. So here, if your insurance denies therapy, physical, speech, any of that, then the regional center will work with you to get their therapists involved. And then in that sense, then you get a whole different physical let's just use physical therapy as they'll give you a physical therapist that will come to your house. I mean, I don't know now with COVID, but
yeah,
they'll come to your house, and then that is your new therapist. But the cool thing through them is, even if you don't want to use the therapy options, they help you with finding like a teacher that will come to the house. And at least that kind of gives you, at least for us, like our teacher, she was kind of like an extra therapist, because she was like the play therapist. Like she was there to have fun and show like different types of toys or things to get attention. And she would work with her team, and they would all discuss like each client and come up with new ideas. It's just a really cool option that we at least have, that I hope more states have it.
I think we have a similar one, but it's not through the hospital, but it's through the public school system. So if your child is homebound, they will bring in therapists and teachers and do homeschool, like, you know, for them. I mean, this is before COVID and all this stuff, but Kyra was actually able to go to preschool physically. Like, the bus picked her up, and we had a nurse go with her, and the school provided it, and she got all of her therapies there, and the special needs pre-K program. It was amazing. I'm so sad because COVID ruined it.
Yes.
Yeah, our school district does the same thing. My son is on what's called home hospital, because he's been on it for quite a few years now. We used to just take him out of school during the flu season, but because there were just so many kids getting sick and always having to take him home, that we eventually just permanently went on the home hospital program. And it's, like you said, the teacher comes to the house every day, not now, of course, physical therapist, speech therapist. We even have music therapy, which is—
I love that.
So, but we also have, which I was actually just trying to look up to see if your state actually has the regional center, because that's like a completely different thing. And they will provide services for you up until 5 years old to when they're school age. But they also provide something called respite, which is where they will pay someone to come in and actually, watch your child, even if you're still there for a couple hours, just to give you some time. They do some different services, but I was trying to look up to see if your area has it.
I feel we have that in Idaho, and I feel pretty supported with all of that. It's amazing. I didn't know all the resources that, like, the health and welfare, like Medicaid and stuff, supplies us.
Another note too with respite is you can have anyone be your respite nurse. So if you have like a family member, your mom, a cousin, whatever, all they have to do is fill out the application, and they can be paid to be your respite. So if you have someone that you like really trust, that you would rather be in your home, then they be paid to do that.
Absolutely. Because we know with Mito kids, you know, just not anybody can come in and take care of my best friend who's helped me raise my son is the respite person. And
good.
And she watches them anyway. So it's just kind of like because you obviously, Mito kids are complicated, and you can't just trust,
I can't just bring anyone.
I remember when they offered it to me, I was like, no, pretty much no one comes into our home except for family. And
I did the same. I kind of laughed at the person. I was like, no.
And it was funny because my best friend, I actually owned a home with her. We lived together, and then we purchased another home that has a pretty large granny flat, and so she purchased it with us and lives there. She's my son's like best friend in the world.
I love that.
And so we have the same address. So they were like, well, just we'll figure it out. I'm like, we live at the same address. Like, how can that be? Because it usually they say it has to be somebody outside of the home, obviously. It can't be like a parent or something like that. So it's they will work around stuff. So
we've kind of just become experts on like how to find the help that we need, and all of these like government programs or type things that Kyra needs. We've really become very smart on, and I didn't ever want to be good at this.
No, it's definitely something you don't plan on, but
So is there anything else that you guys want to tell us about Kyra, or anything that we didn't cover that you want to talk about?
No, I think, the biggest thing for me is she's really just kind of put life in perspective for me, it's kind of slowed things down to kind of look at more of the important things in life. And focusing more on just quality. And, you know, like we talked about, we're not as worried with what the quantity entails with her, but, you know, it's been very challenging, and we've had a lot of, you know, heartbreak with this, but she's also been the biggest blessing in our lives. And we just feel very fortunate to have her.
Yeah, so we're lucky to be her parents.
We're obsessed with her.
We really like her.
Obsessed.
Well, I have to say, I obviously haven't met you before, but you two are doing an amazing job. You already are so knowledgeable about everything, and you're doing so much for her that I'm really impressed, because I know it took me a long time to learn all the different things, and you two are on top of it. So,
thanks.
So she's blessed to have you.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I just want to, like, if I have to turn anything, you know, positive about this experience, I just want to help other people when they have questions about, you know, things that are like, I just want to guide people through if they need to use my random knowledge that most people don't. But, you know, to help parents with newly diagnosed kids or something, like I have to figure out. But I think that this is kind of just giving us a purpose, you know, like just to help others, because we've had so much help with Kyra. So we just kind of want to reciprocate that. And I don't know when we can do that, or if we can do that, but that's just kind of my goal with this, I think.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, that's one of the reasons. I said reasons. That's one of the reasons we started this podcast, because
I love it.
You know, we want to help other parents, and sometimes it's totally random knowledge that only pertains to your child, but you never know who else is going to be in that situation, or, you know, need that little tidbit, or just, you know, sharing other people's stories. It's, you know, we're on our own journey.
Yeah.
And it's amazing to come together and share.
If this podcast would have been around when Kyra was first diagnosed, I was searching for podcasts about Mito stuff, and searching for anyone who was having the same story as us. And so it's going to help so many people. I'm so happy that you guys asked us to be on it, because unfortunately there is a lot of Mito out there. It's just not always diagnosed correctly. So I think people will hear your guys' stories and our stories and be like, oh, it's so similar. You know, we speak the same language.
Yeah, exactly. We want people to feel like they do have a connection with somebody out there. They might not have the resources to find you guys or find the family that is like them, but they are out there. It's not, Mito is not that rare. It seems like it when you first dive in, but like the more stories we hear, the more podcasts that we do, or the more research that we do, you just realize, like, no, this isn't rare. People need to stop saying or stop recording it as that way, because that's kind of what makes it hard for us to get the resources that we need, because and it's weird that so many, I don't know, to me, I still think it's very weird that doctors and nurses and just that medical professional, a lot of them have still never heard of it. And I know that we are all we've all dove into this. So yeah, our world is smaller. We see a lot more Mito, but I feel like if we can find each other, then why haven't any of these people heard of it, or why have they not dealt with it, or at least know a person with it, you know?
Yeah.
But we'll get there.
It's not like cancer, you know, it's not like funding everywhere, and hospitals, you know, do all this research, you know, it's because it's so unheard of and misdiagnosed that we don't have the right, you know, funding and research, and that could really help our kids.
Yes.
Yeah.
It could really help Kyra, you know?
Yeah. Well, we both really appreciate you guys coming on with us and telling your story, and we love hearing about Kyra, and I love seeing her pictures.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thank you guys. So nice to meet you guys virtually.
For sure.
Well, we are the Mito Podcast. If anyone has any suggestions or questions, please either message us on Facebook, you can message us on Instagram, or you can send us an email at mitopodcast@gmail.com. And I'm Ashley.
And I'm Megan.
And we'll see you next time, or here next time.
Thanks for listening.